I'm so pleased to have Patrick Meyers with us, sharing an update about the Condor project. Patrick joined the Yurok Tribe in 2019 to serve as the lead biologist and field crew lead for the Yurok Condor recovery program. Patrick has worked for federal and state agencies and non-governmental organizations throughout the country to research, conserve, and restore a variety of threatened and endangered species. He has also contributed to the research and management of large animals such as black bear and mule deer. Patrick earned his MS degree in wildlife biology from Utah State University, where he investigated black bear spatial ecology and behavior. So, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Patrick.
Thank you all for inviting me to be here today. It's a pleasure to be invited. I thought I was coming here with the idea of conveying some knowledge to you guys, but I actually have learned a lot about what a Rotary Club is today. Albeit not much, but up from 0%, that's pretty good. I also learned that in 15 minutes it's really tough to talk about everything that I want to talk about today. So, I'm going to gloss over a few things, but hold on to those burning questions, and I'm happy to stay afterwards for as long as you might want me to. So the creature in question today is the California condor. It has a 10-foot wingspan. It weighs 20 to 25 pounds, and this is North America's largest land bird. They soar at altitudes up to 15,000 feet, and they can cruise at 200 miles a day in search of food or roost sites. What you see here is the juvenile condor, just a couple years old. And that's evidenced by the black feathers on its head. The adult condor, the one we're probably used to seeing, is actually the source of the genus there, Gymnogyps. So what Gymnogyps means is naked head. So condors will start to look like this at about 5 to 6 years of age when they reach sexual maturity.
Bad timing, I don't know.
It doesn't translate, I understand. So the purpose of this naked head evolutionarily is to prevent fouling of the head feathers. And these are for heads that are obviously in the insides of dead animals. So as you can imagine, they wouldn't want that fouling. Condors are, after all, carrion feeders. They're exclusive, obligate scavengers. So they won't eat any live prey. They only feed on carrion. And this is, of course, contrary to some of the myths over the centuries about them attacking children or livestock. That's just not true. But the fact is that condors are really important to a functioning ecosystem, particularly here in California and other places where we've killed off some of our large apex scavengers like grizzly bears and wolves. This is an apex scavenger. It'll remove those large carcasses from the landscape, and it has a really specialized digestive tract and gut microbiome that is able to also remove some of the bacteria and toxins from the landscape, things like anthrax, botulism, cholera. Wow. They are cavity nesters, so they'll utilize ledges or rock outcroppings for their nests. This one is in Zion National Park. They won't bring any sticks or other materials in, like traditionally what we think of birds doing. Here's another example of a cavity nest. This is in Ventura County, partially up a sequoia. So condors are a Pleistocene era bird. The Pleistocene is the geologic epoch between several million years ago until about 11,000 years ago at the end of the last ice age. Now at that time, condor distribution was continent-wide, coast to coast. There's fossil remains in Florida, in New York State of condors. However, because of that ice age, because of the vegetation changes, the climatic changes that occurred during that time, and also the loss of some of our big terrestrial megafauna. So North America was host to several large bear species, mastodon, giant ground sloths, even camels. And when those all died off, accompanying with the vegetative and climatic changes, the condor range shrunk. So about the time when the first Euro-American settlers arrived, this was the condor range. Mainly the western U.S., Rocky Mountain states, up into Canada, down into Mexico. with those Euro-American explorers and settlers, a host of environmental threats were introduced. And those threats produced a rapid decline in the Condor population. We're going to very, very quickly breeze through some of those threats. Deforestation and habitat loss was one of the most obvious ones. It was widespread then, and it continues today. Collection of birds and eggs, either as specimens, pets, or sideshow exhibitions. Direct killing of birds, because of some of the myths that I talked about. Condors are also susceptible to secondary poisoning. So, like I mentioned, all the grizzly bears, the wolves that were poisoned to remove them from the landscape, condors would naturally go in and feed on those things, and they would get poisoned in turn. Other contemporary threats include microtrash. So these are small bits of plastic or metal that the condors will find on the landscape, left by people. They'll bring them back to the nest and feed it to the chicks, which will in turn die. DDT was widely used throughout the country for many decades, and it leads to eggshell thinning, not just in condors, but bald eagles and other birds. So here's an example of eggshell thinning as produced by DDT. On the left, a condor egg that had not been, from a condor that had not been feeding on marine mammals with DDE, the metabolite of DDE in their system, and the one on the right that was, and as you can see it's about a 40% difference. And then there's the biggest threat which continues to face condors, and that's lead poisoning. So this is poisoning from the ingestion of lead ammunition. This is a radiograph of a ballistics gel showing how soft metals, of which lead is one, how they fragment when they go through a body, and in the bottom one showing a non-lead bullet. This is a radiograph of the neck of a deer that was shot with a lead bullet. You can see all those small bullet fragments. So as condors and other raptors will go in and feed on these things, they'll pick up these bullet fragments, and even the smallest one can lead to lead toxicosis. This is a radiograph of a condor itself. And you can see, interestingly, there's the wing radio tag that showed up in the radiograph. But when condors arrive at a carcass, and not just condors, all other birds too, scavenging birds, when they arrive, they could indiscriminately, pick at the hide of the animal. But what they're looking for is the easiest way in. So that bullet channel provides that. And when they go to that bullet channel, they often find the bullet. And you can see this one ingested it whole. So all those threats and others that I haven't even mentioned, like electrocution from power lines, caused the most recent condor decline. And it was a decline so dramatic and so rapid that the range shrunk from this area that I talked about earlier to just 27 birds in the mountains east of Ventura and Santa Barbara, down in Southern California. Now, eventually, condors were listed under the Endangered Species Act. They were federally endangered, and the California Condor Recovery Plan was initiated to help bring them back. But there was a lot that went into that recovery. I won't describe everything today, but in short, very shortly, all those birds, all 27 birds, were brought into captivity to initiate a captive breeding program. Now, at the time, they're a little more endearing to this age. Now, at the time, nobody knew if this would work. But biologists knew that this was a last-ditch effort. Without this intervention, the species would have gone extinct. So you could leave them on the landscape to die out, or you could try something bold. And they did that. And little by little, condors reproduced. They bred in captivity, and it produced these chicks. And eventually, all those chicks turned into juveniles and adults, and those birds were released on the landscape. And the places they were released, these are the 5 current reintroduction sites. There's one down in Baja, Mexico, one at the Grand Canyon, and 3 down in Southern and Central California. They're operated by a variety of agencies and entities, Park Service, Fish and Wildlife, Ventana down in Big Sur is a nonprofit. Every recovery site has a flight pen. This is one at Pinnales National Park. I used to work at this site. And these flight pens are used to hold young birds prior to release to let them acclimate to the area. And they're also used for trapping of wild, free-flying condors. So trapping is an important management tool that allows for birds to come in and we can give them health checks. We can test for blood lead levels to see if they've been ingesting anything with lead bullets. And we can change out wing tags if the wing tag stops functioning. So it's a really important management tool. And on the right-hand side, you can see the trap that leads from the exterior of the flight pen, allows the birds to go inside, and that's the way they're trapped. And as the recovery program continued, you can see a measure of their success here. So little by little, the population increased, and this is a good visualization of the change in population from 1990 to 2012. 1990, when the first birds were re-released to the wild. And here at the top, you can see the light blue, which is the contributions from wild-born chicks, which was an incredible milestone, which began about a decade after those first birds were released. Here's the more recent update. You can see about 500 birds, 500 condors exist. 300 or so in the wild, 200 or so in captivity in the captive breeding programs. So that's a very quick, breezy overview of the biology of the bird and the recovery effort. But there's another side of the story, and that's the importance of condors in Native American societies. So to the Yurok and many other First Nations of the Western United States, the condor is a sacred animal, and they figure prominently in the creation stories of many of these tribes. For instance, even though no one in the Pacific Northwest that is alive today has ever seen a condor free-flying over their homeland, they still feature prominently in many Native American ceremonies and creation stories, dances and regalia. The Yurok World Renewal Ceremony features the condor as a prominent figure. Condor feathers are still used in the dances and regalia, and condor songs are still sung, even though no one alive has ever seen one. And it's because of this cultural importance and the void that has been left from the condor's absence that led the Yurok Tribe to initiate the Condor Reintroduction Program, which exists today, and it's been going on for the better part of a decade. And the goal of that program is to reintroduce condors to Yurok ancestral territory. And here's a quick visualization of Yurok ancestral territory. In the red, you can see the Yurok boundary there along the Klamath, and you can see state and national parks there in the green. And it's because of this geographical overlap between the Yurok Tribe, ancestral territory, and Redwood National and State Parks that led to a collaborative effort to bring the condor back. But recovery is not so simple, specifically for such a high-profile endangered species like the condor. And there were a lot of steps that needed to go on to make this possible. So the tribe and its partners needed to determine if Yurok ancestral territory and the surrounding Northern California region was suitable for reintroducing condors. And knowing that they once lived here, the obvious answer might be yes, it is suitable. But a lot has happened in the last 100 years, and a lot of studies needed to go on to assure federal agencies that this was a worthwhile project, one with a likelihood of success. So marine contaminants were assessed with particular emphasis on DDT. And the results showed that our area had some of the lowest levels as compared to other condor reintroduction sites. You can see Northern California, Oregon, Washington here on the right. The tribe undertook studies to study blood lead levels, and we used other avian scavenging birds, turkey vultures and ravens, as surrogates to test blood lead levels on the landscape. And again, Humboldt on the left-hand side there, our area was one of the lowest out of all those tested. Now, that was turkey vultures, and this is the result for ravens, and you can see Humboldt there on the right. So, promising results so far. Then a biologist out of Portland, Jesse Delia, undertook habitat analyses to look at foraging, nesting, and roosting potential sites all along the western U.S. and found that our area appears to have the greatest abundance of quality habitat for condors anywhere in the West Coast. And that includes places down where condor reintroduction sites are currently operating. So we know of the tremendous natural resources in our area, including expansive prairies, oak woodlands, and some big trees, which are obviously important for nests and roost sites. So here's a map produced by Save the Redwoods that shows the greatest quantity of old-growth coastal redwoods in our area, not surprising. We also have abundant food resources along the coast, pinnipeds, cetaceans. We've all heard about the 2 whales that have washed up over the last couple weeks. And this is a couple of condors feeding on a whale down in Big Sur. So we know that's an incredible resource that can feed them for months at a time. But we also know the existential threat that lead poses to condors and how that is the limiting factor right now in condor recovery and what's limiting them from a self-sustaining population. So it was also important to engage with the hunting community. So we conduct shooting demonstrations. We provide non-lead ammunition where folks can come out and test their rifles with that non-lead ammunition and kind of dispel some of those myths that surround copper and other alternatives. We conduct hunter education courses where we teach not only the rules and regulations that would allow folks to acquire their hunting license, but also concepts associated with stewardship of the land. And we participate in non-lead expos and demonstrations. The messaging for all these things is not only the dangers of lead toxicosis to wildlife, which we really care about, but also the dangers to people. You know, for the same reasons that we've removed lead from our paints and our pipes and our gasolines because of the threats they pose to us, it seems to us that it would make sense to remove them from ammunition and the food that we're potentially eating. Now, a big part of the reintroduction has and will continue to be reintegration of people with the bird, because ultimately this is one of our missions, is to bring it back to a place where it's really significant to local cultures. And this is a Yurok Tribal elder meeting with Mike Clark, lead zookeeper at the LA Zoo, to talk about condor recovery over the past several decades. So all partners recognize that a reintroduced condor population would be benefit to the condor recovery program. It would provide a buffer. You can see here on the map on the right. It would provide a buffer from any localized threats that might exist at any of the other sites. And it would provide a gateway for the bird to the Pacific Northwest, where resources are really abundant. Ultimately, the goal is a self-sustaining condor population with benefits to the condor reintroduction program at large, but also benefits to indigenous and Western cultures of the Pacific Northwest. So just briefly acknowledging some of our many collaborators over the past decade and hopefully future collaborators as we move forward. And I thank you for your time and interest, and I'm willing to take any questions you might have.
Diamond was one of your collaborators, and I was thinking about this. So one of these babies decides to make a nest in the middle of their commercial forest.
Yeah.
What happens next if they want to go cut some trees?
That's a great question, and that's something that just couldn't be talked about. But the fact is that the proposed project, and it's proposed, it's not finalized under NEPA yet, so we're working towards that. It's still working its way through the regulatory process. But it's what we're planning for is what's called a 10J population. And that's non-essential experimental, in which case you can tailor the regulations that surround the bird to be more flexible for local interests. So green diamond is, of course, one of those local interests. And the way it's written in right now into the regulations is that there would be a 200-meter buffer between any condor activity. So it's a roost, it's a nest site. So there could be no management activities within that 200 meters. And that's something that was agreed upon by multiple entities, green diamond included. Yeah, it's a great question.
What is the timeline that you're goaling for a release?
Yeah. So short term, no, I say this with some trepidation. It's been a long process. You know, these have been decades of studies, and you know, I arrived in earlier this year from another project, and I marvel at the work that they've done before I got here. But the truth is that those folks thought the reintroduction might happen 5 years ago, and it hasn't happened yet. The process is long, especially for condors. So fingers crossed in the next year or two. And that's kind of that's the loose estimate. But the plan calls for a release of about 6 birds every year for 20 years. That's kind of the broader goal to reach that self-sustaining population. So, yeah.
With the recent whale wash up on our shores. One of them was buried to decompose undersands. Would that be something you were working with to leave it above ground so that it would be a resource for the birds?
Whales are great resources, and I was disappointed to see that, but the fact is it's a really public area, so I understood that decision. It seems like the second whale is not going to be buried, so that's one of potentially several that might be on the shore right now between Mendocino, Humboldt, and Southern Oregon. So hopefully there's enough resources out there where if they need to bury it in a public place, we'll understand that. But yeah, we will engage with Fish and Wildlife and the folks in the Marine Mammal Center and see how a balance that can be struck between that.
Will there be a captive breeding program here, or will the new birds come from Southern California?
The new birds will come from the existing captive breeding programs, which exist at the Bird of Prey Center in Boise, Idaho, with Peregrine Fund, Portland Zoo, LA Zoo, San Diego Zoo. So those are all intact, and we'll be providing the birds, and then they get released from there to the different sites.
Tell them about our weather.
Yes, don't need
We'll have a
jackets.
long acclimation period.
Do we know anything about the white on the leading edges of the wings? Did they evolve that for heat regulation and thermals or anything like that?
Yeah, so that's that window, as it's called, is common in a lot of birds. Actually, a lot of animals in general. If you notice, the underside of fish is a different color than. So yeah, it's an evolutionary strategy to help them blend in one way or the other, or meet certain biological needs. Yeah.
Last questions.
Thank you all so much.